I was scrolling through my husband's phone to find a photo for his mother's birthday card. Instead, I found a voicemail, 2 minutes long, him and another woman talking about how much happier he was with her while I was home with our kids, believing he was 1,800 miles away visiting his dying father. Tonight, every single story is about the exact moment someone discovered their partner's affair. Not months later, the moment itself. 5 discoveries, 5 lives changed in a single instant. This is the part that gets me every time. Let me take you back to where each of these stories started. My name is Christine. I am 38 years old. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and 11 months ago I discovered my husband's affair through a voicemail he had accidentally left on his own phone. A 2-minute recording of him and another woman discussing how much happier he was with her. A recording that reached me because his phone had apparently pocket-dialed his own voicemail during their conversation, saving the entire exchange in a mailbox I checked routinely as part of managing our shared family calendar. My husband's name is Michael. We had been married for 14 years, and I want to describe the specific circumstances of that day, because they made the discovery even more difficult to process. Michael had told me he was traveling to visit his father, who lived 1,800 miles away and had been in declining health for several months, a trip he said would take 4 days and that he had been preparing for with what seemed like genuine concern for his father's well-being. I was home with our 2 children during this trip, managing our usual routine, when I checked our shared voicemail box for a message from our daughter's school that I had been expecting. Instead, I found a message I did not recognize, 2 minutes long, and when I played it, I heard my husband's voice, unmistakable, along with a woman's voice I did not recognize, in what was clearly an intimate, ongoing conversation, discussing their relationship in terms that made unmistakably clear this was not a new or casual arrangement, but something with history and depth, including specific references to how she made him feel compared to how he described feeling at home. I want to describe what it felt like to sit in my kitchen, my children playing in the next room, listening to my husband's voice discussing happiness with another woman, while I believed him to be caring for his dying father hundreds of miles away. I listened to the recording 3 times, needing to be certain I was understanding it correctly, before I saved it to 2 separate locations and began, with what I can only describe as an unnatural, adrenaline-fueled calm, investigating further. I called Michael's father directly, someone I had a warm relationship with independent of my marriage, and asked as casually as I could manage how his visit with Michael was going, learning immediately that Michael had never arrived, had never even mentioned planning a visit, and that his father had, in fact, spoken to Michael by phone just the previous day without any indication he was supposedly en route. I want to describe the 2 days that followed before Michael returned home, during which I gathered additional information, checking our joint credit card statements to identify a hotel charge in a city 3 hours from our home rather than anywhere near his father's location, and preparing myself as thoroughly as I could manage for the conversation I knew needed to happen. Update: 4 months later. I filed for divorce within the first month after Michael's return, presenting him with the recording, the credit card statements, and the confirmed absence of any actual visit to his father, evidence that made any attempt at denial immediately impossible. Michael's affair, it turned out during the subsequent legal process, had been ongoing for approximately 8 months with a coworker he had met through a work conference, a relationship he characterized, when finally forced to explain, as something that had started innocently before escalating in ways he claimed even he hadn't fully anticipated. The divorce was finalized 2 months ago, and given the clear evidence of infidelity, our state's laws allowed this to factor into the financial settlement in ways that ultimately worked significantly in my favor. My relationship with Michael's father, remarkably, has remained strong throughout this process. He has been consistently supportive of me and has expressed his own disappointment in his son's choices, telling me during one difficult conversation that he had raised Michael to value honesty above almost everything else, and that this situation represented a profound failure on his son's part rather than any reflection of insufficient effort on mine. I have custody of our 2 children, and Michael has been navigating a significantly diminished role in their daily lives, a consequence he has told mutual friends he did not fully anticipate when the affair began, apparently believing, in whatever calculation led him toward that hotel 3 hours away, that the risk of complete discovery was smaller than it ultimately proved to be. Michael's own phone betrayed him, a voicemail he never meant to send. And just like Christine discovered the affair through an accident, the woman in story 2 discovered hers through something far more deliberate, not an accident at all, a message sent by the other woman herself, on purpose. Wait, this is the part that gets me most. Here is what happened. My name is Danielle. I am 34 years old. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and 9 months ago I received a message on social media from a woman I had never met, explaining that she had been in a relationship with my husband for approximately 5 months, believing him to be single, and had just discovered through a mutual friend who recognized his photograph that he was actually married with 2 young children. My husband's name is Brandon. We had been married for 6 years, and I want to describe receiving this message because the woman, whose name was Jessica, had approached the situation with what struck me, even in my initial shock, as genuine care for delivering difficult information as respectfully as the circumstances allowed. Her message explained that she and Brandon had met through a dating app approximately 5 months earlier, that he had presented himself as divorced and living alone, and that their relationship had developed into something she believed was serious and heading toward genuine commitment, including discussions about eventually moving in together. Before her discovery of his actual marital status had revealed the entire relationship was built on a fundamental deception she had never suspected. I want to describe what it felt like to read this message, understanding that my husband had been maintaining an entire parallel relationship for 5 months, one serious enough that Jessica had genuinely believed marriage or long-term commitment was a realistic future possibility, all while coming home to me and our children with what I had believed, until that message, was ordinary daily life rather than a carefully maintained double existence. I asked Jessica for whatever evidence she was willing to share, understanding she had no obligation to provide anything but hoping she might, given how the situation had unfolded for her as well. She provided screenshots of conversations spanning the full 5 months, along with photographs Brandon had sent her, several taken in locations I recognized from what I had believed were his solo business trips that had apparently actually been extended visits to see Jessica rather than the work travel he had described to me. I confronted Brandon that same evening, presenting him with everything Jessica had shared before he had any opportunity to construct an alternative explanation, watching him move through denial, then minimization, before eventually acknowledging the relationship's full scope once the specific screenshots made any continued denial impossible to sustain. Update: 4 months later. I filed for divorce within 2 weeks of Jessica's message, and Brandon moved out shortly after, initially attempting to characterize the affair as a temporary lapse he deeply regretted, an explanation that became harder to accept once the 5-month duration and the seriousness of his relationship with Jessica became fully clear through the divorce proceedings. Jessica and I have maintained occasional contact since her initial message, an unusual but ultimately meaningful connection given how her decision to reach out, despite having no obligation to do so, provided me with clarity I might not have otherwise gained for considerably longer. She has told me she ended things with Brandon immediately upon learning the truth, expressing that she found the deception itself, beyond even the marriage specifically, To be a fundamental violation of trust, she was not willing to continue navigating regardless of whatever feelings had developed during their 5 months together. My divorce from Brandon was finalized last month, and I have primary custody of our children, with Brandon's relationship with them currently limited to supervised visitation, while the court continues assessing appropriate long-term arrangements given the pattern of deception the situation revealed about his broader judgment and reliability. Jessica did not have to reach out, but she did, and just like Danielle, learned the truth from a stranger's message. The man in story 3 learned his truth from something far more clinical. A hospital waiting room, where he discovered his fiancée already had an entire family he never knew existed. This is the part that stays with me. Here is what happened. My name is James. I am 40 years old. I live in San Antonio, Texas, and 8 months ago, while sitting in a hospital waiting room following my fiancée's emergency surgery, I discovered she had an entire secret family, including a husband she had never divorced and 2 children. When this husband and his family arrived at the same hospital, having been contacted directly by hospital staff as her listed emergency contacts, information that contradicted everything I had believed about her life for the 3 years we had been together. My fiancée's name is Rachel. We had met 3 years earlier and had been planning our wedding for the following spring, building what I believed was a shared life together, including a home we had purchased jointly 18 months earlier. I want to describe the specific sequence of that day, because the confusion built gradually before crystallizing into complete understanding. Rachel had been in a car accident requiring emergency surgery, and I had rushed to the hospital, providing my information as her partner, only to be told, with some confusion from hospital staff, that her listed emergency contact was actually a different name entirely, a man named David, along with an address and phone number I did not recognize. I initially assumed some administrative error, perhaps an outdated form Rachel had simply never updated, until David himself arrived at the hospital approximately an hour later, accompanied by 2 children who appeared to be around 8 and 11 years old, all 3 of whom clearly knew hospital staff and had clearly been contacted as Rachel's actual current family. I want to describe the conversation that followed in that waiting room, one of the strangest and most disorienting of my entire life, as David and I gradually pieced together, through careful, increasingly horrified questions to each other, that we had both believed ourselves to be Rachel's primary partner, that David and Rachel had, in fact, never divorced despite what David explained was a marriage that had become largely separate in daily life over recent years, with Rachel maintaining what he had understood as an apartment for work purposes in the city where I lived, an arrangement that had apparently allowed her to maintain both relationships simultaneously across a considerable distance, with David and their children in one city and me, believing myself to be her actual partner working toward marriage in another. Update 4 months later. Rachel recovered from her surgery over the following weeks, though our relationship, understandably, did not survive the discovery that occurred during it. I ended our engagement immediately once she was stable enough for the conversation, and the process of untangling our jointly purchased home has been legally complicated given that Rachel's marital status to David meant our home purchase had occurred while she was still legally married to someone else. Complications my attorney has described as unusual but navigable given the specific circumstances. David and Rachel are now proceeding with an actual divorce, a process he told me, during one of several conversations we've had since that hospital waiting room, he had been avoiding for practical and financial reasons even as the marriage itself had become largely nominal, an avoidance that inadvertently allowed Rachel's parallel relationship with me to continue for 3 years without either of us understanding the actual complexity of her life. David and I have developed an unexpected, if understandably complicated, connection through this shared experience, occasionally checking in with each other as we both navigate the aftermath of discovering that someone we each believed we knew completely had been living an entirely different, parallel existence that neither of us had any indication of until that hospital waiting room forced the collision of both realities simultaneously. James and David discovered each other in a hospital waiting room. Our fourth story tonight is about a discovery that happened somewhere far more mundane, a grocery store, on an ordinary Tuesday, because sometimes the biggest betrayals are revealed in the smallest, most everyday moments. Wait, let that sink in. Here is what happened. My name is Angela. I am 36 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and 13 months ago I discovered my husband's affair during what should have been an entirely unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, driving to the grocery store for milk and bread. When I passed a hotel parking lot and recognized his distinctive truck, parked at 2 in the afternoon on a day he had told me he would be working a full shift at his usual job. My husband's name is Kevin. We had been married for 9 years, and I want to describe the specific, almost surreal quality of that moment, because there was no dramatic confrontation, no accidental discovery of messages or voicemails, simply the ordinary act of driving past a hotel and recognizing a vehicle I had seen in our driveway every single day for years, immediately understanding what its presence there on a workday afternoon most likely meant, even before I had any additional confirmation. I want to describe what I did in the moments immediately following this recognition, because I did not immediately confront the situation, instead continuing to the grocery store as originally planned, purchasing milk and bread exactly as intended, my mind working through the implications of what I had just seen with a strange, disconnected clarity that I have since understood was likely some form of shock response, my body continuing through routine tasks while my understanding of my marriage fundamentally restructured itself in the background. I returned home and, rather than confronting Kevin immediately when he arrived that evening claiming to have worked a normal shift, I began quietly gathering information over the following week, checking his phone when opportunities arose, reviewing our credit card statements for any charges at that specific hotel, and eventually finding confirmation through a charge dated exactly the day I had seen his truck at the hotel I had recognized, for an amount consistent with a room rental rather than any of the alternative explanations I had briefly, desperately, tried to construct for myself in the days immediately following the sighting. I want to describe the week between seeing his truck and finally confronting him with concrete evidence, because it required a specific kind of discipline to continue functioning normally, managing our household and our 2 children's schedules, while privately processing what I increasingly understood to be true, wanting to have undeniable proof before initiating a conversation I knew would fundamentally change our lives. Update: 4 months later. I confronted Kevin with a hotel receipt and several days of additional evidence I had gathered, including phone records showing frequent calls to a number I did not recognize, calls that traced back to a woman he worked with, someone I had met on several occasions at company events without any indication of what was apparently developing between them over recent months. Kevin's affair, once fully revealed, had been ongoing for approximately 4 months, and while he expressed what seemed like genuine remorse once confronted with undeniable evidence, I made the decision, after several weeks of considering whether reconciliation might be possible, that I was not willing to continue building trust from a foundation this fundamentally compromised. Our divorce was finalized 2 months ago, and I have found, somewhat unexpectedly, that the specific memory of that ordinary Tuesday afternoon, driving to buy milk and bread, has become a strange marker in my life, the exact moment when everything I believed about my marriage silently, invisibly, began to unravel hours before I would even have language to explain what I somehow already understood to be true. Angela's entire marriage ended with a glance at a parking lot. Our final story tonight, Story 5, is about a discovery that came not from seeing something, but from hearing something from their own child, who had no idea what the words they were repeating actually meant. This is the last story, and it may be the one that stays with you longest. Here is what happened. My name is Michelle. I am 33 years old. I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and 7 months ago I discovered my husband's affair through something my 5-year-old daughter said during an ordinary bedtime conversation. A single sentence she repeated without any understanding of its significance, that immediately revealed her father had been introducing her to another woman during what I had believed were simple father-daughter outings while I worked my Saturday shifts. My husband's name is Tyler. We had been married for 8 years, and I want to describe the specific moment this unfolded, because it began as an entirely ordinary bedtime routine, my daughter Emma chattering about her day as 5-year-olds often do, mentioning various things about her Saturday spent with Daddy, before saying with complete innocence that Daddy's friend Sarah had helped her pick out ice cream and had said that Emma was such a good girl. Information delivered with the same casual tone Emma used to describe anything else about her day, with no awareness that this represented anything unusual or significant. I want to describe what it felt like to hear my daughter mention a woman named Sarah, someone I had never heard of, described in terms that made immediately clear this was not a one-time encounter but someone sufficiently present in these Saturday outings that Emma spoke of her with familiarity, someone who had apparently been helping select ice cream flavors and offering the kind of warm, personal comments that suggested an established, ongoing relationship rather than any incidental encounter. I asked Emma gentle follow-up questions, careful not to alarm her or suggest anything was wrong, learning gradually that Sarah had apparently been present during several recent Saturday outings, that she and Daddy held hands sometimes, and that Emma had been told, in what I understood immediately to be an explanation crafted for a young child, that Sarah was Daddy's special friend who Emma should keep as their own secret because it would be a fun surprise for Mommy someday. I want to describe the specific horror of understanding that Tyler had not only been conducting an affair during time I believed was dedicated father-daughter bonding, but had actively enlisted our 5-year-old daughter in maintaining secrecy about it, asking a child too young to understand the actual implications to participate in concealing his infidelity from me. Update 4 months later. I confronted Tyler that same evening, once Emma was asleep, presenting him with exactly what she had told me, watching him move rapidly from attempted denial to acknowledgement once he understood the specificity of what our daughter had innocently revealed made any continued deception impossible. Tyler's affair with Sarah, it turned out, had been ongoing for approximately 6 months, conducted largely during his designated Saturday time with Emma, a detail that I found and continue to find among the more difficult aspects of this entire situation to fully process, understanding that he had specifically chosen to involve our young daughter, asking her to keep secrets from me, rather than finding any other time or arrangement for his affair that did not require enlisting a 5-year-old in active deception of her own mother. I filed for divorce within the following weeks, and our custody arrangement now includes specific provisions, negotiated through our respective attorneys, that prohibit either parent from introducing romantic partners to Emma during designated parenting time without advance notification to the other parent, A provision I insisted on specifically because of how this situation unfolded, wanting to ensure Emma would never again be placed in a position of unknowingly participating in secrets she was too young to understand the actual weight or implications of. That's all 5 stories tonight. If any of these hit close to home, let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you want more stories like this, every single day hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. A like on this video helps YouTube show it to more people who might need to hear one of these stories. Tonight, tomorrow's video has a story that might be the most shocking one I've shared yet, so make sure you're subscribed to catch it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.